welcome to another episode of Breaking the Guard. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about UFC 322, big card, one of the best or biggest cards of the year. A lot of great matchups. I'm going to give obviously spoilers here. I will say the main and co-main event were real stinkers, but the rest of the fights were very entertaining fights. And I actually started from watching from the prelims, and there were some good matchups there. What was interesting, there was a match between Eric McConaughey and Bisagar Surskogrov. I can't pronounce the names. I've never seen either of them come in before. The harder name to pronounce, Bisagar, apparently undefeated, had a lot of hype behind him. And McConaughey was a new gun, few losses. I think he had 3 losses to a record. They were all by knockouts, and the guy he was fighting had 10 wins and 9 knockouts. So this was the biggest underdog of the card. But surprisingly, the fight was very competitive right from the get-go. Now, the favorite ended up winning, but he didn't run over him like he was supposed to. But it made for an interesting fight. The other fight that was interesting was Pat Sabatini. He had to deal with Jose Mariscal, and while Sabatini was winning a lot of the grappling exchanges, he did sustain a cut pretty early, multiple cuts on his eyes, which sometimes can end the fight. So you saw Sabatini really have to lean in on the grappling more to try to stay away from getting the cut opened. And at one point, it looked like Mariscal was trying to even use his hands to try to spread the cut, and Sabatini wasn't pleased with that. That's pretty foul play. It's one thing if you're punching the guy purposely on the cut, that's fair play, but it's another thing if you're just getting fingers to try to spread them open. That's pretty messed up. I'm not saying he did it. That was the accusation, at least. We had some one of the other fights that, again, people were sleeping on, and myself included, Ethan Ewing and Malcolm Wellmaker. Wellmaker, undefeated. I think he was another guy that had a 10-0 record or something like that. Very good striker. And Ewing is a 48-hour notice, 2 days. And apparently he had fought the week before, scored a knockout, felt good. They gave him the call, and he jumped on it. And pretty much the moment that he called, he had to start making weight. So you have to understand, for a UFC debut, that's a huge ask, right? But obviously this guy was hungry, and the fight sounded like his previous fight went really well. So he's like, okay, I'll just jump into it. So it might have been great as far as he was already in camp, in essence. So a week away, you're still in good shape. He took it to Wellmaker, and in a department that I wouldn't have suspected, because this guy was a wrestler, so you thought, okay, he's going to try to wrestle him out. But his striking was superb. Great footwork, hand combinations, very crisp. Had a good chin, because he did eat one check hook that clapped, boof, and didn't faze him. And that was pretty much the last significant shot that Wellmaker landed. And the rest of the fight was all Ewing. And he looked great. He did get some wrestling exchanges, although he didn't really lean heavy on the wrestling. He was mostly just outboxing Wellmaker, and to the surprise of just about everybody. And won all 3 rounds on the scorecards. Again, another guy who was an underdog. Very impressive debut. Honestly, probably one of the most impressive debuts that I can recall seeing, just because for the short notice and the ask of fighting somebody who's being billed as the next big thing in the division, and just to run through him like that. Mental composure is incredible, and not to mention his fight skills were also incredible. He looked very polished. He's already ready to get ranked at this point, the way he was fighting. So well done by Ewing. We also had Kyle Dawkins and Gerald Meerschaert, and unfortunately, this was a short fight. Uh, Kyle was able to drop Meerschaert really quickly and then got on I believe it was a Darce choke that secured the finish. You know, Meerschaert has been fighting Father Time for a while. I think this is kind of the signal of the end here. You know, at some point you got to hang your hat, and realistically, there's not a lot of upside in continuing to fight. You're just looking to sustain more damage. You're probably not, I mean, you're a very big long shot to getting to a UFC title at this point. So why are we fighting then? Is it for paychecks? If it is, that sucks. You know, like, he's been fighting for so long in the UFC, you would think he would have been taken care of better. Or that perhaps if he would have managed the finances better. But either way, like, yeah, we got to start talking about hanging them up. We had Aaron Blanchfield and Tracy Cortez. Blanchfield had a great performance. Where was I? Oh, I lost my... Yeah, she won round one pretty convincingly, stepped into round two, dominated, was able to secure a takedown, and got a rear naked choke. Not bad. She's got 2 big wins under her belt. Rose Namajunas, her previous fight, so she's ready to make a title run again. So good job on Aaron on that fight. Then we had Roman Kopylov and Gregory Rodriguez, aka RoboCop. RoboCop is so big, my God, you know, and he he looks like he's at least a weight class above Kopylov, who isn't a small, heavy, middleweight either. But God, he's just a big dude. Hits hard and throwing lots of kicks, and those kicks are just heavy. It looks like Roman really couldn't get into a rhythm. Normally he's able to outstrike people and do well there, but really couldn't find the range or the rhythm against RoboCop. And RoboCop is just chopping him the whole time. Lots of good kicks, clean striking, wins, easy decision. So good job for him. Then we had the main, or the featured bout of the prelims, which was Bo Nickel and Rodolfo Vieira. And Bo Nickel once again came out showing that he can throw hands. He's got, and throw feet, because I believe this would be his first head kick knockout, which obviously was set up from the rest of the striking, but dropped him with a head kick. I think it was the lead left, if I recall correctly. And that was all she wrote. So good job on Bo. Then main event starts. We have Beneil Dariush and Benoit Saint Denis. And I didn't know this before, but Dariush missed weight by 2 pounds, which is not great. And this was another really short fight. Benoit was able to score, I believe it was a straight right, that instantly floored Dariush, and it was a quick end to the fight. I think it was like a 20-second fight. Not looking great. This is another time that Dariush has suffered a pretty bad knockout. Another guy where I know he's not as old as he looks, because he looks old because he's got all the gray. I think he's still in his 30s, but he's been suffering quite a few concussions now. So it's another one of those that we have had that talk, you know, like, what are we doing here? Because you don't want to have a traumatic brain injury that's going to have long-term consequences, you know. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, he's served up quite a few knockouts. He had a good streak at one point, but now the streak's going the other way, not looking great, you know. Benoit looked fantastic, you know. There's not much to say. He scored very early in, so, you know, good for him to coming back into winning form. Next fight here, Leon Edwards and Carlos Prates, and this was interesting matchup, striker versus striker. We're gonna see like who is gonna come out on top. Leon showed great grappling in round one, and it's funny because Leon's known as a striker, but whenever he gets into good wrestling clinches, he really dominates, and he pretty much controlled all round one with takedowns and was on Carlos's back for a good portion of the end of the fight, or end of the round rather. But he couldn't really do anything with it. Carlos was pretty dismissive of the threats from his back. At one point, he was standing up with Leon behind him. Leon was punching him, and he just like played to the cameras, smirking. Not really trying to escape either, but I guess he knew it was short time, so he was just working to wait for the round to end. When the second round came, though, his moment was pretty furious. He landed I think this was another one that was just a straight right down the middle that just floored Leon Edwards and scored himself another knockout. And that's the first time I think Leon Edwards has been knocked out. And it's just unreal. And that's another guy, and this is something I've noticed, and you're going to hear me saying the same thing again, but some of these guys are just so big for the division. Now, Carlos doesn't seem like he's very heavy. He's just got a weird body type. He's like all legs. I'm like a lot of torso and short legs. He's got the opposite thing going on. His legs are just so long. It must make fighting him awkward just because from range. But this wasn't even a kick. This was just a good, cross down the middle that went through the guard of Leon that just floored him. One guy in the Fighting Nerds has been keeping the win streak going, right? So that's going to make some interesting matchups because we had three big fights. This is one of the big fights at 170. Then the next one coming up, we have Sean Brady with Michael Morales, and then of course there's Jack Magdalena with Islam Makhachev. So there's quite a few fights here where we have some interesting matchups we can make. So we just went over the first one. The second one, Sean Brady and Michael Morales. Michael Morales, now this is one of the guys that's just humongous at 170. He looks like he could be fighting 205. The guy is huge, significantly bigger than Sean Brady. I don't know how he makes the weight. The guy is massive, and not just in girth, but tall. And you can really see it because when he's fighting Brady, he's really lowering his level and bringing his hips back. And he's so tall that it looks funky to me because he's really crouched over and knees bent. Obviously being prepared for the shot because Brady is known to be a very good grappler, and against somebody like Morales, who is more known for the striking, the threat of the takedown was a big component of this fight. So we see Morales kind of crunched over for most of the fight, throwing some shots, and everything's coming out pretty heavy. Brady is not able to get this fight to the ground, and Morales lands just a very clean strike, drops Brady. I'm trying to remember if it was the first round. Yep, it was in the first round, and it's just crazy. I'm looking at the time here: 3 minutes, 27 seconds. And it started with punches. He scored a TKO, but it was pretty much a done deal after that first punch lands. And that's a big 170-pounder. He's got some good defensive wrestling, and obviously he's got a lot of power. He's going to be a problem. That guy is going to be a problem. I'm looking at he's one of the guys I tell people all the time, man, if I was fighting in this era, I walk around now 197 and 198. But I'm 15% body fat probably, maybe more or less, somewhere around there. I would have to get down to 10%, which for me would mean losing another 10 pounds so I'd be walking around 186. 170 would be the highest I could fight, and I would be tiny for 170 now compared to someone like Morales. Like if I was going to be a serious contender, I would have to be fighting at 155, which would just be brutal for me. I've never cut that much weight before. They were talking about like the 40-pound weight cuts. It's like, Jesus Christ. But that's what these guys are doing. Like Morales had to be cutting 40-something pounds at least to be able to be at that division, which is just insane. Anyhow, we then move into the co-main, Valentina Shevchenko and Weili Zhang. And like I said at the start, these fights were not too entertaining to me. I wanted Shevchenko to win, but it was a boring win. She just dominated from start to finish. She was able to keep her range, very counter-fighter oriented like she normally does. But whenever Weili tried to clash with her or get close, she would get clinched and tossed immediately. Pretty much like zero resistance in the takedown game. And I'm not saying because she doesn't have it. She obviously does. I think it's just that Valentina's wrestling is so good. And she's not doing double legs or singles. Everything is just like body locks and over-unders. But she's just so strong in those clinches that she just tosses her every single time. I think she landed 4 out of 5 takedowns that were attempted. I think it was only the second or maybe third round that were on the feet for the whole round. But every other round, she was able to secure a takedown, strike. The one thing I wish Shevchenko would have worked harder more for a finish. She looked like she played pretty conservative from top. She was landing some striking. She was trying to look to pass, but nothing really too heavy. She did say she respected Weili a lot for her power and didn't want to play around with it, but it's just boring as a spectator to watch someone get, wet blanketed for 25 minutes straight. So if you thought that was boring, then we go into the main event. We're getting more of the same treatment because Islam Makhachev just wet blanketed Jack Della Maddalena as well, but in worse fashion, in the sense that Jack's striking was non-existent in this fight. Islam won the whole fight, start to finish, standing, wrestling, takedowns, jiu-jitsu, everything. And it started really early. I believe Islam landed the first strike, low calf kick, boom. And then landed the second one. And I think that's all it took. And that's what DC was saying, and that's my thinking as well. I think after those first couple of calf kicks, he destroyed the calf. And sometimes it hits you harder than others. It looked like Jack didn't take it well because he wasn't able to fight from his southpaw stance because every time he would stay there, he would just get chopped. And everything was exclusively calf kicks. And you guys, if you've never eaten a solid calf kick before, I can tell you firsthand, it's miserable. The effects of it are almost immediate. I know the first one I recall, I took it from a really small guy too, probably like a 125-pounder Kuwita. And I was kickboxing with him. And at that time, this was like maybe the early 2000s. I hadn't ever seen someone throw a calf kick before. I've never taken one before. And this little guy just calf kicked me in sparring. Poof! And my calf instantly locked up. And I was so stiff for the rest of the sparring round. I could barely move. And I was like, what the hell, man? And I was fighting conventional stance, and I'm not a switch stance fighter, so I wasn't able to guard it. And I don't think I even took that many more calf kicks, but it's just the first one was enough to ruin my day. And this was with a shin protector, shin pads, mind you. And, he still was able to dig in deep enough. And probably also because I was unfamiliar, I didn't even realize the threat of it. But no shin pads, full power, a guy your size, and he lands a couple of them back to back. Yeah, that will mess you up in a severe way, So uh, if people are wondering what the hell happened to Jack striking, that could have been it. He just could have got his leg chewed up extremely early and had no way of coming back from the fight. Because the rest of the fight doesn't make a lot of sense either. He's been preparing with Craig Jones, and I'm sure that he also had Volk, and Volk arguably had one of the best performances against Islam. So you would think, okay, they would have an excellent game plan, and this guy's bigger. But on the ground, he was helpless. He was just keeping half guard the whole time, but like not using it to get up to his feet or not trying to work from it. It was just like survival half guard. And most of the fight, you see him grimacing the entire time, like he's in a lot of pain. So this is where DC was commenting, like it might be that calf, like the pressure from trying to hold this is getting him, or maybe it's the shoulder pressure from the crossface. I don't think. If it's a shoulder pressure from the crossface, then he's done early, because I don't know. I've eaten shoulder pressure from a lot of people, and it could be miserable, but you wouldn't be wincing like that. Like he was wincing from it felt like stabbing pain, So I would agree with DC. I think it's probably the leg, or maybe he popped the rib, or something happened that we don't fully know, because he was fighting like he was severely hurt. Islam did what he was supposed to do, which is, he took him down and held him. Again, another guy I wish he would have worked harder for the finish. He did a good job of controlling, didn't take any risks as far as finishing. Didn't also let loose. Like, we didn't see any heavy hands or heavy elbows. It was just more of a grappling match, which is funny. But this was slightly better than the title defense of Driscus, but not by much. Just marginally better. But he got dominated in a similar fashion, never really made a concerted effort to try to win the fight. It looked like he was just trying to survive. Like, he got into survival mode within, the first minute of the fight. Again, in a 25-minute fight, really sucks for the spectators. I was hoping for some more fireworks, especially coming from the training camp that he was coming from. I expected a much better fight. It's going to be interesting because it doesn't leave a lot to be asked of who can challenge Islam. Islam obviously came up in weight. He looked good for the size. He didn't look small. He looked about the same, maybe slightly smaller than Maddalena. And I'm sure he'll get bigger over time. But solid performance by him, although, like I said, wish I would have seen a finish from him. Now, Bilal is out of the question for a title shot because, he obviously got beat pretty bad by Jack. So the MMA math doesn't really add up to make sense for him to get a shot. They're trying to say, Kamaru Usman title shot, which is ridiculous. The guy's 1-3. He's aging out. I don't think he needs to prove himself with a big win to be able to get a title shot. He can't just jump the line. And, Dana White's saying that Kamaru Usman's the greatest of all time ever, which is, that's a hard thing for me to take. I'm like, no, I think if we're gonna say, especially in that weight class, welterweight, it's obviously GSP. Obviously, like, there's no one else who's done what he's done. He lost twice in his career. Both losses avenged. He lost to Matt Hughes. He avenged it. And he lost to Matt Serra, and he avenged it. That's it. And he's won all his other fights. Although, some of them are really close. I know the Johnny Hendricks one, people catch grief about. But, hey, he stayed on top, And there's no foul play on his there's no like accusations of cheating or playing dirty. So to me, GSP is the easy go, especially if we're talking about exclusively welterweight. To say now, that's not to take away from Usman. Usman had a great run. I just don't think Usman beats a GSP. I don't think so. He's shown he could be. I mean, Leon Edwards took him down. Leon Edwards knocked him out. These are things I don't see a GSP suffering from. I think he's probably one of the best welterweights that we've seen, but not the best. And he doesn't merit a line skip to fight Islam. I think you would have to match him up with one of these new guys. Now, Carlos Prates, it's a bad matchup. He would lose pretty badly. He gets taken down, not with not that much struggle, and he's not gonna be able to rest out of those with Islam. So, although he might have earned it, he's not gonna win that fight. Morales, it's an interesting one. He's a little bit, to me, I mean, this was a big step up, taking out Sean Brady like he did. And he's definitely got size and power. But I'm not sure about the wrestling. Is he going to be able to stay on his feet? I don't know. I think it might be good to see him get one more test. Although, I mean, Brady was a big level jump up. And I think Brady was ranked number 2. So, yeah, I guess he's kind of ready for it. He's just going to have to see. But that would be an interesting one. I mean, either of those two would be interesting. Although with Prates, I feel like he's going to have a hard time. He's just going to get taken down. We also have Shavkat. I don't know where he is in the mix of things. He would be an interesting one because obviously he can grapple. I don't know to the extent that Islam can. But it's a guy who's got a good all-around base, and it's another big 170. Because I feel like if you're going to try to take on someone like Islam, well, you at least want to have some strength size advantage going into it in your favor. And someone like Shavkat or Morales would have that size advantage and presumably the striking advantage. But, people sleep with the striking of Islam, but like I said, you want all the striking here. Now, he started with a calf kick, but he's sound. He's got good hands. He doesn't get too stupid. I mean, obviously, he doesn't want to get in a drawn-out striking battle. And that is the one thing I do like about these Dagestanis. They don't forget where they came from. Some guys, they become, you have guys who are really good wrestlers and they score a knockout and then they fall in love with striking and knockouts and they change their whole style to accommodate to that, forgetting what got them there in the first place. In my opinion, if you're a fantastic grappler, don't try to reinvent yourself into becoming a fantastic striker. I'm not saying don't get better at striking. Absolutely get better at striking. And if you can score knockouts, score knockouts. But don't forget your wrestling. You should always go towards where the fight will be the easiest. So if you're fighting somebody who's a terrible ground guy, don't become, a K1 striker. Take the guy to the ground and finish him on the ground. Now, if you're fighting someone who's a great grappler, okay, now you can use your striking to your advantage. And then the striking is also going to set up your takedowns because once he starts worrying about strikes, takedowns become easier and vice versa. But some of these guys, they get, they get fixated on the striking and they forget about wrestling and grappling. And I know the UFC kind of rewards that type of behavior. But obviously someone like Islam doesn't forget, right? I think he could have probably beat Jack on the feet based on how he was doing. But he didn't play games. He's like, I'm here to win fights, not to entertain the crowd in a way that makes sense, like at high risk to myself. And I'm here to win the fight in the easiest way possible, which is what he did. I would just argue, get the finish. He tried a couple Kimuras, but didn't really seem to go hard on them. I think he was content just staying on top. But that's my critique. In any case, yeah, that picture now will be interesting to see how it develops. Are they going to try to throw Morales in there, or are they going to try to throw Prates? I imagine they might throw Prates because he's a little more proven. But that would be an easier fight for Islam, I think. Or not easier, but I think for me the conclusion is more obvious. I'm not sure about the Morales. I haven't seen enough of him yet to be able to know. I mean, this fight was only a one-round fight, so really didn't get to see the wrestling game develop enough. I would be curious if him against like a Shavkat would be an interesting fight. Although Shavkat could be another guy that could jump into a title picture. But yeah, that's the UFC 322. So we got one more pay-per-view for this year. Like I said, I like this card. I just didn't like the last two fights. Every other fight was very entertaining. So if you didn't watch it, you could if you can watch the prelims and stuff, that will give you most of the juice. Because the other fights were all quick. The Sean Brady fight was quick. The Leon Edwards was quick. The Beneil Dariush was quick. You don't need to pay for the pay-per-view. Like I could have gone without for the pay-per-view on this one. I could have just watched the undercard and been happy with it. Anyhow, we do have an ADCC trials going on. I actually have it going on my screen behind here. They're on I think they're on the finals now. Some of the familiar names on here, we have Achilles Roca, Brandon Reed, who else? Dorian Olivares, John Combs. Yeah, so there's some of the familiar names in the finals here. I'll have to tune in to see how they finish up, and I'll probably talk about it later in the week. But that's all I have for you guys. I'll catch you all next week.